Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast chat. And today I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit about why we should train both the sumo and the conventional deadlift. And when I say should, I don't mean that you have to. I just mean it would be in your best interest to do so if you want a broader strength and muscle mass base, and you want to be able to pull more often without getting beat up. All right. And I mean this in the context of conjugate type training. In other words, I'm not telling you that you need to come in and do a bunch of heavy work sets on both exercises. I'm not telling you to come in and do 5 rep maxes. You could go that route. But you will need to be very careful with the total volume of training that you do. And I don't know that for most lifters, that's the best approach. So when I say this, I'm talking in the context of conjugate training, which means max effort days and dynamic effort days, right? And the reason I say this is because with the sumo and the conventional, they work muscles differently and they fatigue certain joints and smaller musculature as far as overuse and inflammation go completely different. And that latter point is one of the main benefits that we get. And it doesn't matter that you say, well, I don't like the sumo deadlift. I don't care about what my sumo is. I'm only going to pull conventional for my maxes. Well, that's fine if that's what you want to do. And it's fine for you to say the conventional is the one that you care about. But we all train lifts that we don't care about. In other words, you don't come in and say, well, I'm never going to incline bench because I only care about the flat bench. If you would personally benefit from the incline bench, that would be stupid, right? That's actually stupid. Also, it's saying, I'll never bench press with dumbbells to help build my pecs because I only care about the flat bench. If you would benefit from the dumbbells, see, that's dumb. It's a terrible way of thinking. So with the sumo versus the conventional, the stance width difference matters a lot. And what you actually find is that the sumo deadlift will train the conventional. In other words, your sumo deadlift has carryover. All the volume work that you do, and in this case the speed work, with the sumo will carry over to your conventional. It's just like Louis Simmons had said when he was talking about anything with stance width, wide carries over to narrow better than narrow carries over to wide. With squats, we find this to be true. I would suggest the same is true on deadlifts. And the reason there's differences is that when you start looking at the musculature involved, the hips and the groin muscles, the abductors and the adductors simply get worked harder on a sumo deadlift. They get worked harder. They get worked a lot harder. And if you don't understand why, look at the sumo deadlift. It's the wide stance. Get the wide stance. Try it yourself and tell me you don't feel the difference. The thing is, though, that the sumo deadlift is more of a squat. You'll see people say really silly things who haven't looked at the literature, and they'll say, well, the trap bar deadlift is the squattiest deadlift. No, it's not. The sumo is. And this has been researched because we have a squat to hip hinge continuum. I don't like it when people say, oh, a squat versus a hip hinge. No, I've discussed with you guys before, they're a continuum, right? We had that talk just the other day in the Good Morning and Squat video. Deadlifts have the same category. All deadlifts are inherently a hip hinge, so they're on the hip hinge side of the continuum, right? They're on the hip hinge side, but they have degrees of squattiness. In degrees of hip hinge versus squat, it goes least squat would be conventional, then trap bar deadlift, then sumo. And the sumo is considerably more squatty than either two, right? The gap between them is actually larger. And accordingly, your torso stays more upright. When you do a sumo deadlift, your torso is more upright than on a conventional deadlift. In fact, it should look relatively similar to your box squat. Right? You squat down to the bar more, torso stays more upright. Accordingly, there's less stress on the back. So if you have someone whose their back is really fatigued from their other training, or you have some history of back issues, you might find the sumo easier to do. On the other hand, the conventional deadlift uses less of those hip muscles, and particularly less of your groin muscle, less quad actually, but a lot more back. Because again, by the nature of it, we need more stabilization in the back. You're going to use more lat, you're going to use more trap, you're going to use more erector, because we have to bend over further. Right? Your torso is at a deeper angle on a conventional, irrespective of your levers. Now, you'll get people who say, well, why are some people better at one versus the other? If we take height out, because it should be obvious, that's almost its own topic of discussing why taller people tend to be better at conventional and why really short people tend to be better at sumo. Particularly women, because again, women are pulling with the same plates and bars that men are, and women on average are even shorter than men. However, there are plenty of world records in conventional from women too. But it has to do with your height. So below average height people, and I don't just mean 1 or 2 inches. If you're 5'7", we're still not that short. I'm talking short people. They're going to generally be better at sumo. Taller people, because of their levers, and when I say taller, I'm talking 6'1" or higher, they're probably going to be better at conventional. These are not universally true, by the way. It's just general guidelines that have to do with your moment arms. But what you usually find is that if you have average height lifters who are considerably stronger than one versus the other, and I have people in both categories on my coaching, right under my clients, I have people who are in both categories, always do, that have at least a 20-pound disparity or more, sometimes a 50-pound, between their conventional and sumo. And it'll be both directions. Simply put, the people who are better at sumo in that category probably have stronger lower bodies, right? Stronger hips, possibly stronger quads, but almost certainly hips and groin. And the people stronger at conventional probably have stronger backs. And by back, I mean their overall back, their lower back, right? Their erectors, their lumbar erectors or thoracic erectors, possibly their lats and traps. Right? Guys who have weaker lats and strong legs tend to be quite strong at sumo usually, for example. But over to our other point, why does it matter for the training? Well, we work different muscles, and we also have different points of fatigue, because when you start looking at the joints involved, joints and connective tissue are what limit our training. And what you find is that, for example, if your back is starting to really hurt quite a bit, what is the usual prescription? Well, it's time for you to deload, right? Your back is getting fatigued all the time. Well, if you've been pulling conventional and you switch over to sumo, that fatigue will regress. In other words, your back, and again, all as far as its ability to stabilize things, because again, the back is mostly used isometrically on these movements, it's going to be subjected to less load. There's going to be less shear stress on your back. Your back can recover while you continue to make heavy pulls. Over to the thing with sumo. People who are pulling only sumo, their hips tend to get fatigued over time. Well, if your hips are getting too fatigued from pulling sumo, rather than having to deload or just quit pulling or reduce pulling volume dramatically, you can switch to conventional and continue to pull. Your hip musculature and your, again, joints and everything have time to recover. And if they have time to recover, you can be back to pulling heavy sumo again pretty soon. Right? You can train one while the issues of overuse and inflammation from the other are recovering. This is one of the big benefits. This is a massive benefit of training both. And so that's why you see oftentimes in conjugate type training 3-week waves of sumo followed by 3-week waves of conventional, or at least variations of them, because they could be deficit pulls, block pulls, rack pulls, against bands, against chains, right? But if you switch them in 3-week waves, that's a common way to do it. You're fatiguing your hips more on the sumo while your back recovers. Then you go do a 3-week wave of conventional. Your back gets worked harder while your hips recover. Okay? You don't lose the muscle and strength gain from the other one, and you can rotate between them back and forth. This allows you to do more pulling and still recover from it. Allows you to do more of it. All right, that's a big advantage. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.